Hello, hello, hello. And I would like to give everybody a big warm welcome. We are saying hello if you're in Los Angeles, if you're in Australia, if you're in Thailand, South America, wherever you are. We have a very large group of people on this webinar today, and you're all indeed very, very welcome. My name is Spencer. I'm the sales director of BMI, and today we're going to be hearing from two of the world's most respected international school counselors, Jeff Neal from Graded, the American school in Brazil, and David Turner from the Dwight School in Dubai. Both great gentlemen. Jeff and David will be discussing how institutions can more effectively work with counsellors from international schools around the world. But before then, I want to briefly bring you up to speed with some of the terminology that you're going to be hearing around the CAP. The THE, Times Higher Education Counsellor Accreditation Program, CAP, is a hybrid online and in-person course that culminates in professional accreditation for the counsellor and the school that they work for. The CAP comprises of 12 one-hour modules that have been prepared by counsellors sitting on the THE Counsellor Advisory Board, of which both Jeff and David are members. We're honoured to have you here, gentlemen, and by our training partners, Common Purpose, who I know are tuned into this webinar. Hi guys, hi friends from Common Purpose. The course is completely free of charge for counsellors and covers subjects such as admission processes, counselling, managing stakeholders. Are those difficult parents we hear? Reporting and advocacy, resilience, sector trends, and other subjects that modern international school counsellors need to keep aware of. Now, some good news. So far, over 1,800, count them, 1,800 counsellors from a remarkable 109 countries have signed up and are part of the CAP. This is indeed a movement that we have all started. Complementing the CAP, BMI and Times Higher Education have also launched the THE Counsellor Hub. This is an online resource for counsellors where they can find news, examples of best practice, industry trends, and even job listings, those all important job listings. Now, lastly, BMI has expanded its hugely popular series of international schools forum and workshops. These are two-day fly-in regional events where counsellors participate in the CAP program whilst also holding a series of pre-arranged meetings with universities who have flown in to meet the counsellors with a view to exploring of how they can work together. BMI's workshops in 2024 will be held in the Middle East, Brazil, Latin and Central America, Southeast Asia, and new for 2024, Africa and China. So feel free to reach out for information on these or any of the other 85 international student recruitment events that BMI organizes every year. Now, let's get to the subject at hand. Today, students are going abroad at younger and younger ages, whether it's to refine their language skills, experience other cultures, gain confidence and independence, or increase their chances of acceptance at a well-ranked higher education institution overseas. This desire to explore the possibility of an international education often starts in the early teenage years, and we'll be covering that in a minute, when students are hungry for options and helpful advisors and guidance counselors can steer them in the right direction. Now, given that they work with these students on a regular basis and see them day in and day out, international school counsellors have a great sense of what students need and which type of educational environment will enable each one to flourish. This makes international high school counsellors an invaluable resource for international institutions who are keen to understand demand and tap into an influential audience early in the student journey. But with some of these international schools reporting up to 300 university visits a year, I've heard it from them myself, what is the best way to engage with these influential individuals and their students? So today, to explore this subject, we're lucky to be joined by two well-known and highly respected counsellors, Jeff Neal from Graded, the American School in Brazil, and David Turner from the Dwight School in Dubai. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we'll be exploring how educational institutions can work more effectively with international school counsellors in what can be a crowded market. So, gentlemen, here we are. Can I start off with you, David? How many international schools visit you during a year?
I'm pretty lucky. Dubai is a pretty well-known place, and so there's no shortage of footfall for our collegiate people and friends to come and visit. So I probably have, I would say, upwards of just shy of about 80 to 90 universities come and visit every year.
Brilliant. And Jeff, how would that be for you in Sao Paulo in Brazil?
80 sounds like a really wonderful number, really manageable. We're on an annual basis pushing over 200. So we'll have over 200
Wow.
universities come and visit us over the course of the year.
So, Jeff, this is gold to find out this information. But what's a good, or what's the best example of an institution visiting you, and what did they do that was different?
Sure. I think of course, the understanding of one's own institution is of primary importance, but the ability to relate to the students at hand, which does often, and David and I think, will both reference this throughout. School context and cultural context is really, really important part of all of this conversation, in the sense that a kid from here at my school in Brazil is going to be very different than potentially than a student who is working with David in Dubai. So understanding a little bit of that sort of cultural competency and understanding a little bit of what I think the white noise in the background is of the situation in which the student is coming from and that representative is entering. So I think when I think of the sort of best examples, I think of people who are well prepared, who show up with a little bit of an understanding of what the Brazilian culture is like. For example, here, to use my context right now, who are willing to engage with students, ask those probing questions, get them to think about themselves in the context of their university. It's not always easy, and it's not simple to put in a little neat box to say, now here, go do this. I also think really fondly, I think perhaps the best visit I've ever had, I'll leave this person anonymous, but we've set up our representative visits out in our student center behind a table, and our students come up to them. And he saw 5, 6, 7 students, which was a good number for that particular institution. And when things started to peter out, he grabbed his materials and went on the road and started walking around to the different student groups and started talking. And he came back with no more materials. He literally handed them out. The interesting story was then he came back for a visit the next semester and had probably 60 kids. Kids saw him and remembered and knew the institution. And it was really, I think, profound in my experience.
Brilliant. That's fantastic, Jeff. Now, we've got your culture there and a very different culture, which David finds himself amongst in Dubai. Now, David, obviously, you can see there's a huge amount of institutions that are visiting. What can institutions do to make them stand out in this crowded marketplace with so many visits? What can they do to say, "Hey, I'm different. Remember me"?
I would always look for an opportunity to collaborate with one of my colleagues. I mean, most of us are on LinkedIn, and it's easy to reach out to us individually. Listen, if you're going to a school and you're going to Dwight, and you just came to see Jeff, and now you're coming to Dwight and you're going to see Dave, and you're like thinking, oh my gosh, what can I do to really engage David? First of all, David's super excited you're coming. And so I'm going to do everything I can to roll out the red carpet, almost literally. I'm not going to put you in a crowded hallway where you're talking to kids between classes. That's rubbish. I'm going to advocate for my community just like you are. So I'm going to work with you. I can think of some of my favorite people. God bless him. I love Lorenzo Wilcox, man, guy from Oregon State. I mean, what a brilliant, and he comes with 3 or 4 other people. And, having people get on the phone, send information out saying, brother, listen, here's what's got me excited. What's got you excited about your community? How can we work together? Craig from Butler. I mean, these guys come out to Dwight every year, and we do something different every year. And so I can roll off names and people, but bar none, talk to your college counselor. Nobody knows our community better than we do. What has us excited? What has you excited? In that wonderful, chaotic mix is an opportunity to communicate, connect, and inspire young people.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, Jeff, we spoke about the gentleman that came to you that revisited and had 60 students. How many times should an institution come and visit a school? Is there an upper limit to this? I mean, obviously they won't be coming in every week, but what's a normal flow, do you think?
Sure. I think the vast majority of the universities that visit us only come once per year, and they tend to come, I'd say, we're a South American school that follows a North American calendar. So when we open in early August, there's very few places in the Northern Hemisphere that are also open. So we get a preponderance of visitors in August and early September. And most of those visits are really targeted on the senior class, the current pending graduates. But what we do see is a lot of universities, institutions choosing then to come back in second semester to really more target those 9th and 10th and 11th graders as they're beginning their thought process. And from where we sit as well, it's a great opportunity, as David just suggested, for some partnerships to involve them. And, I'll give a couple of examples where we've partnered with UK institutions to come in, not just talk about their own institution, but then to talk about applying to the UK. Having a particular institution that came from Norway this past year and talked about the sort of Norwegian higher education market to a broader group of students, not just focused on their institution. It's a great way to sort of, I think, partner and get more, I think, traction among our community.
Brilliant, thank you, Jeff. Now, David, I hesitate about asking this question, and I think we're not going to be naming any names with this one. But what mistakes do the university reps commonly make when they're? I mean, I know there's lots of visits. Not everyone can be perfect, but what's a sort of a mistake that somebody might be making when they're approaching international school counselors and their students, David?
It's actually very simple. When you put marketing in front of outreach, that's no bueno. That's an absolute no-fly zone. I can't think of a situation where that's worked out for anybody in a good way. I think that it's important to remember that I've spent the last 3 or 4 years of my life really going through and really polishing conversations and creating that internal critical dialogue, only to have somebody come in and really pitch a sale. I will smile, I will be polite because I appreciate the effort for someone showing up, but I more than likely won't ask that person back again.
Gotcha, David. And Jeff, is that something that you're seeing as well? That sort of too much of a salesy line?
I do think that, it seldom happens, to be fair. But when we do see it go a little bit south, it's often inexperienced university admissions representatives who are prioritizing, and I'll put it a little bit differently, the conveyance of information about the institution over that establishing a connection with the student, talking to them, getting them before they even talk about their university, having a handshake, having, what classes are you taking? How are you doing? Is the weather always like this? Whatever it happens to be, just to get the ball rolling. The more seasoned, I think, veteran, experienced folks lead with relationship.
Gotcha. I've heard occasionally tales that some of the more inexperienced reps that are coming in find it difficult to make the transition from dealing with educational consultants, who are a completely different sector of the industry, to high school counselors, and occasionally there's a feeling that the counselors are being treated like agents. So are you seeing something like this, Jeff?
Sometimes, on occasion, we will see that. I think it's helpful to explain that I think a fundamental role that we have as college counselors is that of advocate. And our job is to advocate on behalf of our school, on behalf of our students, on behalf of our families, on behalf of our culture, on behalf of the country in which we're currently situated. And sometimes that, I think, gets missed in the translation, where our job is ultimately going to be about best fit. We want students to find institutions that will be a good fit for them in the long run, that will lead to their, eventual prosperity and success and flourishment. But sometimes when I think too many agents or independent consultants get in front of, I think, admissions reps, they sometimes think that our advocacy is along the same lines, about just getting them in. And it's not. It's about finding good fit. It's about finding the right fit for the right kid. And not every institution is going to be able to provide that. So I would come back to one of the questions that you asked earlier about what works really well, and say that trying to understand and trying to explain to our students not only which students will be successful, but which students won't be. Being able to say, these are the kinds of kids that won't be successful at our institution. And I think a lot of institutions struggle with that ability, I think, to disentangle all of that.
Yeah, I think that's very much the case. And David, have you experienced that where you are in Dubai?
I would just parallel to a large extent what Jeff has said. Advocacy is quintessential. You're dealing with, I would ask our colleagues just kind of step back, pull back on the yoke a little bit, and try to understand a greater topography of what we do. Our primary role is, as Jeff said, is advocates. And when we work with that shared understanding, we really have a lot of connectivity. And I think that that's a really brilliant place for us to start to talk about. My favorite conversation is when I go to those BMI things that are so popular. I almost ask more questions than my colleague does, because I don't want to talk about how wonderful your school is. I want to talk about what we can be doing for my community. And so finding that advocacy there is really important. Back to Jeff's point as well, I do think that there's an opportunity to step back as a university and say, where are my agents should be more commonly placed. There are some schools which don't have dedicated full-time high school counselors. For those of us that do, to your point of earlier, we need to make a clear distinction or delineation. I would much rather be working with colleagues directly from the university than have agents perhaps get involved or get in between that kind of collaboration.
Yeah, it is a difficult subject to cross on that one. I want to hit a slightly more physical subject. I mean, here we're talking about international schools, where, depending on the type of international school you're in, the majority of the instruction will be in English. Is there for you, Jeff, a need to have materials in Portuguese at all, or are we looking straight at English at this?
Sure, and I'll broaden this just to say that I know the answer would be different. Again, back to what I said at the beginning, different school contexts, different cultures. We're about 50% Brazilian passport holders, and the vast majority of our Brazilian passport holders have parents who are not educated abroad. So they struggle a little bit more with language. So we have found there's great value in having Portuguese resources available, not necessarily for our kids, all of whom are fully fluent in English, but for their parents, for that ability to then extend that conversation home, send the child home with a brochure that might be, about a particular program that they're interested in, that they can then share with their parents as a little bit more of an understanding, explanation. And I've seen that work well. It doesn't happen very often, frankly, but when they do it, it does seem to, yield benefits.
Perfect. And I'm presuming, David, that in a country like Dubai, with up to 85% of the population are expatriates, then it would probably be in English, I would assume.
Correct. You'd be correct with that. But I do love, once again, what Jeff has said. I think that more often than not, it's the parents that would probably need greater access to that kind of information, given their students are going to school every day. And that would be a very good conversation to have with a college counselor.
Brilliant. Thank you. one of the things that certainly BMI has been involved with recently, and I was lucky enough to see Jeff last week in Portugal, is a fly-in where counsellors are invited into a country, invited into an institution, and this is a great opportunity for the counsellors to find out about various campuses. Jeff, in your experience, do you think is this a good idea?
I think there isn't a better idea to get the college counselors who, yeah, there might only be one of us in a school. In my context, there's three of us. Just to get one of us to be on your campus can pay such large dividends in the long run, where, I think particularly here in Brazil, which is a little bit different in some of the other contexts where I've worked, there's such a trust, there's such a need for the expertise to be with me, for the parents and the families to be able to trust that we're sending a student in the right direction. And there's nothing really better than to say, I've been on that campus. I've been there. I was there in person. Here's what my thoughts were. And, I think what you see as well is those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to be invited on some of these programs and these tours, or who have the resources at their school to be able to do them independently. Our social media platforms are blowing up. We've 100 likes on my Instagram page after my first post last week in Portugal, and that was in the first 10 minutes. So it was they're following, they know, they're hearing. And then when I got back on Friday here in the office, I had 5 kids that tracked me down that afternoon. They heard I was back on campus and said, I want to know more about this school or that university that you had just visited. So I think there's very little that's more powerful if you can find it in the budget to be able to produce these sorts of programs, or partner with a BMI or another group to bring counselors to your campus.
Absolutely. David, are you finding something similar?
Yeah, I'm ready to explode here. Cornfields. There's some of you right now who are snickering because a colleague of mine presented on something, and I was recorded to say cornfields. Absolutely. Fly-ins are quintessential, not just important, but very important. And I realize that it's not in everyone's budget. To follow in kind with Jeff, there's no better way to know about the culture, the feeling. I feel it. And if I'm honest with you, not unlike Jeff or any other college counselor, we are trusted sources within our communities. And we've earned that trust because we've been looking after people's kids for years. And so having that experience and coming back to say, OMG, if you're not looking at X, Y, or Z university, you should be, because flyover universities are often cast aside when you're looking at California and New York that have everybody's focus. So those kinds of opportunities are absolutely essential. I want to add one thing to it. You don't have to fly counselors in all the time either. And if you do that, you certainly want to rotate. But all too often when our colleagues come here and they take us out to dinner, and I'm a foodie and I love you for it, and I'm always happy to eat your food, but it would be great, instead of using that opportunity to bring everyone in to talk about some of the things that Jeff talked about particularly about your university, I would flip that script. I would look at the ROI being greater to say to counselors, hey, you know what, guys, we got everybody here tonight. We just want to say thanks for having us. And we want to find out how to sharpen our own pencils to do a better job at promoting ourselves within your community. How can we create greater outreach within your community? I'm telling you, if you didn't make note of that, you should, because what a wonderful way. Fly-ins can be very costly, but if you're here in the region and you're looking for good engagement and better ROI, again, it's us working with you. We need you.
That sounds fantastic. And what we're talking about here is ways that people can change working, which is fantastic. I've been lucky enough to have been in this beautiful industry for over 35 years, and I wouldn't work in any other industry. It's just the best, loveliest people. But what we do see is that things have changed over those years, and certainly I think that the role of the counsellor has changed. With your relationship with universities, with the role that you have, I'm going to send this to Jeff. Jeff, what sort of changes have you seen in the last, say, 5-10 years about how this relationship works?
Yeah, no, I think I also have a little bit of a different background where I've only been overseas outside of the US for 8 years. Had been in Taiwan, was in Senegal, and now I'm here in Brazil after having spent 14 years stateside at different boarding schools. So I have a little bit of a different perspective. What we have definitely seen, and I would be remiss not to mention here, is that great resignation. We're seeing so much turnover, particularly in those road warrior positions. Where I remember, distinctly early on in my career with a mentor, a director in my office, making sure I met the right people, and it was very clear who the right people were at different colleges and universities because they had been there for forever. And this is the person that you need to know. That's changed so much over the last, it's been 5, 10, 15. It's been sort of accelerating. The great resignation, as it were, was not really a surprise to many of us working in college admissions, in college counseling. But we have seen that exacerbated. But we've also seen a lot of movement. I think that's the other thing that happens is we'll see someone, leave one institution and go to another, and we still have that relationship, which is nice. But that would probably be the biggest one. It's just, I think, the turnover and the rate of change has accelerated. I think particularly among the college admissions representatives. Not much I think we can do about that, but it's worth sort of putting on the table as something pretty profound and significant in the last 5, 10 years.
Exactly, when you're trying to build up relationships over a long period of time, and there is that churn. Of course, not everybody can be in the industry where frequent travel is part of that and people's lives changes. We all know about that. David, what changes have you seen, buddy?
Working with people, getting excited, getting away from drive-by, those kinds of engagements where it's come in, hand out the brochures, and phew, we're gone. Those drive-by engagements are going the way of the dodo, and I couldn't be happier about that. Again, using some of the examples from some of my favorite people, I'll get a call from Martin Miller saying, "Hey, brother, I'm coming to your region. What's got you excited?" And then we can sit down and we can come up with a whole thing, about whether it's setting up a panel discussion and bringing in students and parents, whether it's coming up with breakout rooms and getting students to sign up for a session on this, or this, depending on how many of our colleagues are coming here. We are getting creative. We are finding better ways to communicate, connect, and inspire people. And that to me is an absolute, that's magic. It's effervescent. And it's that kind of real creative flow that's so easy to tap into now. And more of our colleagues, if I'm honest with you, are willing to come after school, and I realize on top of everything I'm saying, what kind of extra work I'm creating, because God bless you guys, I dig it. Y'all are having to go back to your hotel rooms and input, people's email addresses for CRMs. Barf. Come on out and talk to my parents, man. They would totally enjoy an after school session to learn about what's got you excited about your university. And to what Jeff said earlier as well, it's not just about your university, but what can we learn about, a Common App essay. One of my favorite presentations this year was bringing university in to talk to my fellow colleagues, to teach them how to write a personal statement. What an absolute house fire that was. And so those kinds of creative connections are certainly more commonplace.
Brilliant, thank you. And you mentioned Martin Miller there at Temple University, a winner of the BMI Lifetime Achievement Award. If he's not signed up, we're sending him a recording of this. Hi, Martin.
Great.
Brilliant guy. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about here is I'll let you think about the question, which is what's one of the worst experiences you've had during a university visit. But I'll share this with you. It happened with BMI in the last few months, where we were doing a high school visit, and a cleaner who was working on an upstairs balcony took it upon themselves to empty more than a bucket of water over one of our visiting university reps, thereby utterly destroying his outfit. An absolute shocking experience. I wasn't there to see it, but the school very, very nicely fixed everything up, replaced the shirt, got the shirt dry clean, everything was taken care of. But that's an example of maybe a physical thing going wrong during a university visit. What's the sort of, I mean, we name no names, but what sort of bad things have you seen? And if you want to say nothing, then that's fine, I get it. But Jeff, has you anything like that?
Nothing that dramatic, Spencer, but I would say that I think, to sort of flip the question from earlier about what works really well, what doesn't work really well, and this happened at one time this year with a representative from a fairly well-known institution came and sat at the table behind on the chair behind the table with the materials out, and she sat on her cell phone the entire time. And students were walking by. It was very much like one of my colleagues went up to her and just said, "Look, you might want to put the cell phone away." And she was a little bit disgruntled, and I don't know about what, but she said, "No kids are coming to talk to me." I said, "Well, I
wonder why."
Yeah, well, I mean, I think fundamentally our role and our work is about human connection, and that device is usually more of a distraction than a help.
Absolutely. And David, have you got any shocking stories or anything that you'd like to, or you feel comfortable sharing with the audience?
We're amongst friends. Come on. Actually, the shocking story is of my own making. Angela Triplo is a dear colleague here in the region, and she comes from a very well-known university. And God bless her, she came out to deliver to my kids, and then I love to be present. Because if I'm honest with you, those engagements are more for me. I want to hear what's going on. I want to know what my parents and community need to know. And it's fun because I get to sometimes interpret content to make it parent ready or student ready that fits into our existing culture. But I got called out. And instead of meeting her at the door, like I always do, and bringing people upstairs, having a cup of coffee, setting the whole stage for a proper collegiate engagement, everything, the world was literally pulled out from underneath me. And bless her heart, she came. It was me running all around, trying to get things going. And I could only apologize to her. I literally put her in the room with about 4 or 5 parents who absolutely loved her. Absolutely loved her, loved what the work she did, complimented her to the hilt. But the takeaway is we need to be working amongst each other as well. If I saw a colleague on her phone or his phone, I would say something. Conversely, I would ask a colleague to give me frank feedback. Hey, you know what, Dave, didn't really appreciate the fact that when I showed up, I had to find my way to your office. These kinds of engagements have to work for both of us. And so, again, I can only think of a situation that turned out badly, not because of my colleague, but because of myself. I didn't feel like I was able to support somebody that I have the utmost respect for. So the takeaway here, Spencer, is, again, having that kind of shared respect and mutual collaboration.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And I think we've established that it is very important that the university representatives do meet with the students themselves. But at what age? What is the sweet spot? I mean, sometimes you're in an open college and you have youngsters coming up who are grabbing pens. God bless them. But when you're in a more controlled environment, what is the sweet spot? What years should we heading for? Jeff, I'm going to hand that over to you.
Well, I certainly feel that once our formal college counseling programming really kicks in and about halfway through grade 11, that second semester of grade 11 is formative in my experience for getting institutions in front of kids in a much more formal and I think directed way. However, and if I had my druthers, it would be during grade 10. Of course, we have a little bit of a hard time, and I'd imagine that other counselors across the world have the same challenge of getting those 10th and even 9th graders engaged with the college representative process. For them, sometimes university is so far off in the distance that they don't have the wherewithal to understand the opportunities that they have when these representatives visit us. But 10th grade, I think, is really like the sweetest spot to try to get in front of our students.
Thank you, Jeff. David?
Yeah, I would. I agree with everything Jeff's saying. I think that if you're looking at starting off at a natural sweet spot, I'm pretty lucky. I've actually advocated to senior leaders to say, "Hey, listen, I want to talk to grade 9 students even." And so, for the takeaway for our colleagues and to understand the work we do and how you can overlap with that. I mean, what we're trying to do is everybody's on the same continuum from high school, college, and career. And so we're trying to do everything we can to inform and engage best fit, right? And I always refer to that as the critical internal dialogue. So I'm going into grade 9 to start looking at, what's out there, what's possible, and populating those little universes with those kinds of possibilities. And we have our bags of tricks. We use certain platforms and things which help with that kind of engagement. But we're not you. When Kimmy comes and talks to kids from Iowa State about business, I can't do that. I can't ask the questions that she asks. What is neat to me is she's not, and many of you are the same way. I could continually mention names, but when the engagement is about helping inform that critical dialogue, it is amazing. Again, watching those kinds of engagements where the work I can't do, I can't get as granular as you all can when it comes to looking at how business is sometimes taught in this college or sometimes taught in that college. And when thinking about, this or that kind of major, have you considered, I'm often gobsmacked at the level of specificity that our colleagues like you can bring into those kinds of conversations. So I love to think about grade 9. I'm an IB school because I know that in grade 10, we really start to look at DP course selection. So even before then, I'm working from both a college counseling, but also a career side as well. So I like to start in grade 9, and I love, that's something for you to think about as well for engagement with high school counselors. Ask them the same question that Spencer's asking us. Hey, when do you guys get started? And what ways can we scaffold that?
Brilliant, thank you. Now talking about some of the practicalities of it, you've come in, you've visited, you've met the counsellor. Occasionally, you meet the parents, you meet the students. How does a university follow up? I mean, should institutions do the follow up directly with students, parents, counsellors? Are institutions in your country allowed to contact students directly through their private emails? Jeff, could you take this for me?
Sure, I'll go first, and I'll just say again, coming back to one of the things I referenced earlier is this is entirely about relationships first and foremost. Yes, the information about the institutions is important, but not at the expense of the relationship. A Brazilian family isn't going to buy your university hook, line, and sinker without having confidence in who you are as an individual. So that's a really important, I think, factor. Here in Brazil, that was a little bit different in other contexts. But what I would say is that, and I think ironically, because it's certainly something that I've heard has contributed to a lot of the turnover, is the individual connection with students, the individual connection with parents, the individual connection with college counselors is by far the best marketing that you can do. I've kind of glanced at some of the questions that are in our future for the Q&A at the end. And there's a lot of questions that kind of circle around that marketing idea. And it really is about individual relationships and establishing that connection with specific individuals. There's also this thing, just to kind of to make sure it's been said, because it hasn't come up so far. There is something at every school that I've worked about followership, where when you get a kid from a particular school, more tend to follow. All right. And there's this idea that there is more legwork that is required earlier on in a relationship between a university and a school, or when there hasn't been a pre-existing one, where there hasn't been a matriculation. That early going, I find that there's an awful lot more value in putting in those long hours writing emails and following up and that whole thing. But every school that I've worked at, including here in Brazil, if the student discloses his or her email address independently, they are able to be reached out to directly by the institution. So that's not something that we have to worry about. We won't give you the email addresses ourselves. That's not ours, but yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. And David, I wanted to ask you a question because you've mentioned a few different institutions today, and obviously we're talking to some very good schools here. We've got universities that are all across the rankings, and sometimes the universities are not as highly ranked as others, and we love doing business with them. But if you're not a highly ranked university, how do you still generate interest from students?
It's been said, we are your best advocates. I cannot prestidigitate a future outcome. I can inform it. I can make sure that my students have access to good information. I have seen some of our colleagues who may be present here tonight turn kids around. You need to spend the time and consistency. That's something that we've talked a little bit about, but consistency is essential. Consistency is your friend. What can we, again, if I'm telling you right now that I've got a timeline from 9 to 12, you should be sharpening your pencil thinking about, well, hell's bells, how can I reach out and talk to counselors about creating a contiguous engagement? As long as it's sincere, as long as it's building trust, is uber important. Using a colleague I mentioned earlier when he came to our school. He's from Philadelphia, a gentleman from Philadelphia, distinguished gentleman, and he was able to speak a little bit of Arabic to one of my students, who immediately said, "You speak Arabic?" I'm not saying that everyone has to speak Arabic, but making those authentic, because again, this is someone that comes to the school quite a lot. Having those epiphanies, those ahas, those contiguous, consistent, relations with community will eventually turn people around. I really love what Jeff said. I think, kids do. I'm an advocate. Our students are your advocates. Our parents are your advocates. What are you doing to create the buy-in in my community? What can we be doing to better vet you? Again, it's already been made very clear that we need you. So what kinds of things can we do? What kinds of things we do?
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Plowing through some questions here, and we've got some very, very good questions that I want to get to in the Q&A. But before we do that, can I just ask Jeff?
But before we do that,
do you like to be left with printed brochures?
Yeah, so again, this is one of those school context things. Seldom do I want paper copies, and part of it is just the layout of our office. We have nowhere to put them. Whereas I'll reference one other school where I worked. We had a big giant, it was like a library magazine rack, and we had a whole sort of process for making sure it was sculpted and manicured, and all the material. Kids came and took it. However, just don't really have the resources to share it out. And our students, I think in today's day and age, you also have to think about your audience from the student perspective. They're not really a sort of a paper wielding bunch. They are looking more for that social media, more for online, don't email probably. They're looking for that sort of more instant sort of approach. So we, right now, if when representatives ask, do you want me to leave materials, it's really only when I know a particular student wants or needs something and they weren't able to attend the visit. But by and large, no. But again, that will vary dramatically from institution to institution. Oh, Spencer, you're muted.
Leave that. I mean, I've spent almost all of my life for the past few years since COVID in front of that. I'm glad that we got that in at least once. What we're going to do is we're going to go one more of our questions, then we're going to go to the Q&A because there's some great ones in there. And David, I'd like to ask you, as well as institutions offering undergraduate programs, what sort of other educational providers should visit international high schools? Language schools, I mean, summer programs, pathway foundation program, community got K-12. Should K-12 providers come and see you?
That's going to depend on schools and governance. Here, local governance will probably not allow other than universities to come in and present at schools. And I'm not sure SLT would support that as well, because the revenue stream that's generally aligned with that. There are instances where I have seen test prep companies and things like that partner with schools. I don't know. That's going to depend on the school. One that I truly love is Dahlia Wardenay when she comes, or anybody that's coming from a community college. Chris, when he comes, I absolutely really enjoy more information. I myself went to a community college. I think that that's a really good opportunity. I've had other institutions like David Game. I did a podcast with them. I recorded some content. It was wonderful because not many people really know about those kinds of alternative entry points to higher education. And I think that that's entirely doable as well. I would love to think that everyone in my cohort is a 40 plus IB diploma, but they're not. I've got some that are really struggling. And so with that, it would be great for, community colleges and some maybe foundational year people to come in and present, because even college counselors, especially here in the region, the idea of community colleges is completely foreign to them.
Perfect. And Jeff at the graded the American School of Brazil, do you welcome all comers, or is it specifically HE?
That's a great question. We haven't been challenged much to have to make too fine a point on that. But any higher education institution, we will welcome to campus, understanding the lengths that they've gone to come and visit us. And we're also, it was mentioned earlier, but we're also happy to connect people, particularly those visiting the region for the first time, to other local school counselors to make sure, we're all pulling from the same playbook, pulling on the same oar, whatever the metaphor is that you want to use. And we're more than happy to help kind of direct you towards other places like that. But we, I think our two primary visitors are fundamentally higher education institutions, though we do get a lot of community colleges that come through, often as part of tour groups. But second is summer programs, and that ability for our students in particular to be able to learn a little bit more about what those summer program opportunities are at universities, or whether they're independent of universities. We find those to be, we welcome them with open arms.
Can I just add something there real quick, Spencer?
Please.
I think you're right. The thing that would be the focal point, however, is the motivation. If you're motivated purely on profit and you're not willing to do some outreach, for example, if you're promoting summer programs and you're a big company, and there are quite a few, I know because I get their emails, it would be great to think that you could bring something more to the community as well, that you're not just there to say, hey, we're offering these really wonderful summer programs, please come and take some of our brochures. Something more of an outreach would work well with them as well.
You've hit on one of the questions that's one of our attendees who's called anonymous attendee. A few of those. It's about the follow-up that the institutions do with the counsellor, and I'll read this out. Thank you for your presentation. Blah, blah, blah. Many of us travel with large groups when visiting international schools has limited time with students and counsellors during brief college fairs. We all strive to conduct outreach and have meaningful interactions. However, we often have to have follow-up via email after we return home. What kind of content messaging is more helpful for counsellors? And this reminds me of a question which I've been asked, which is, how do I make my emails more responsive? How can I send an email to a counsellor? They're busy people. Jeff, do you want to grab hold of this?
Sure. And frankly, I've not been part of too many conversations about this. So I also fear that my answer here is going to be different than others. I would say that I know how to find the information about your institutions. I teach our students how to do this. So the constant barraging of, updates and, annual previews and annual reviews, I don't do much with those. I do save them, and when I'm looking for information, I do start in my inbox. But it's too much. It's overwhelming. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 280 different institutions among our 110 students to which our kids are applying. I can't keep track of all of those emails. But what I can and what I will do and prioritize is an individual email conversation. If I get a direct outreach and it's not a form email, I will respond to it. I will, engage in that way. And I found that some of the best sort of relationships that I've forged over the last year, just thinking about that short time frame, were people from markets where or institutions where they didn't have a big travel budget, were trying to crack into the Brazilian market, and really just wanted to have a conversation about how they might be able to do that better, and wanted to know what information I would want to know about their institution to help encourage our students. It is more work. It absolutely is more work, but I'd like to say that it's a little bit more enjoyable for both of us when it is on a personal level. Again, this is one of those things that feeds into that burnout and that great resignation referenced earlier. But I love doing that part of the job. I love connecting with people. Most everybody that I know that does this work has that same desire. So I'd say thinking about it on a much more individual basis.
Brilliant. And that's something which Rebecca Colon also carried in one of her questions as well. David, did you have some feedback on that?
Go organic. Go organic, man. I'm here to tell you, and those who've seen me speak on these kinds of topics before know the soapbox I stand on, and that is I have filters waiting for you when you start an email, dear counselor. I won't even see it. Won't even see it. And I think that's a pretty pushed out example. I'm pretty lucky, like Jeff, to have been, doing this for quite a while. And I don't want to say I'm overly insular, because like Jeff too, I'm always looking for people who are hungry, people who are looking to do things differently, people who are looking to serve. And so, more often people will poke me with a stick on LinkedIn, which I think is funny as sin. They all comment on my mustache or whatever it is, just to create
Beautiful
that
mustache.
kind of that kind. Thank you. Just to create that kind of fun and organic connection. And I think that, to Jeff's point as well, form letters are, man, I've got filters for those. So be careful.
Brilliant. We've got filters. Perfect. Andrew Van Loo asks, how effective is giving out swag to students? Is it really worth the investment, Jeff? Oh, okay, David. David wants who wants the swag?
Jeff. Sorry, brother. Yeah, I just was going to it's nice for I love my coffee cups. Please, Jeff, go ahead.
No, same. It can be very effective. It depends on what it is. I'll make reference to a particular institution, again, remain anonymous, that showed up with beer bottle openers. And that flew really great with the kids, but it didn't land very well in our community. I also, I'll name drop a little bit here too. And Christy Culp at Loyola Marymount showed up a little early for a visit. She had all those, if you've seen the Loyola Marymount bags, they're shiny, sparkly bags. And she had a group of fourth graders that came up and wanted to talk to her about her institution. So do they work? They work as a hook. That's not going to be enough to sell the kid or the family, but it is a conversation starter. I tell reps who are wondering, what should I bring? I'm coming from wherever. I've been on the road for months and months. Say, honestly, if you have it in the budget, just bring some candy. It just doesn't have to be from your home. Just bring something that'll lure the kid in, to give them that initial impetus to have a conversation with you.
Perfect. Look, folks, I know that we're going to be coming up to a close soon. Pardon me. We've got a really great set of questions here, and I think what we'll have to do is to review some of these and maybe do another session on this. You lucky gentlemen. We have had a message in independently from Martin Miller. I'm not going to read it out, but I do have I do have a question for you both to finish off with as we head towards the festive season. You know, things are winding down a little bit. It's a time for reflection for us all. David, if you'd like to start, do you have any sort of wishes for the coming year? Is there any sort of Christmas or seasonal spirit or anything that makes you want, this is what I want in David's gift bag for next year?
Yeah, there's a lot I would love to say. This is my favorite time of the year, obviously, because I'm halfway there. But I absolutely cannot say enough. We need you guys. We really do. I mean, for me, I know, and probably for Jeff, to do a session like this is an absolute joy. And it's, if anything, it's a way to say thank you very much. I think we often, I would love to have this same session with counselors and say, hey, you know what? Y'all need to, like, make it better. You really do. And you need to do better, because we often take for granted the fact that when you guys show up, that you just somehow miraculously appear. What we don't see is the 5 or 8 or 10 schools that you've been to before us. And then one of my last sessions with somebody, I'm like, man, brother, you got time for a coffee? And they're like, dude, no, man, we're on a bus to Abu Dhabi. And I'm like, what? Shut the front door. No, we've got a session tomorrow morning at 7:30. And they were leaving me at about that same time. So I really, from my heart, I want to say to all the wonderful people out there, and when I see you in events and things like that, and you come up and we're advocates, and we've got that same common denominator. So blessings and joy to everybody. And I wish everybody a safe and healthy holidays.
That's lovely, David. Thank you. Jeff, obviously not quite as developed with the Santa beard as David is, but going quite well, it's got to be said. Any thoughts about the coming year?
Yeah, I read something recently that talked about, if you're trying to find satisfaction in your own life, the best way to do that is to help others find it in theirs. And the dividends pay back. And I was struck by that only from the perspective of that at its very root is the nature of our job and the nature of our relationship. From, we like to often we resort to this language about this side of the desk and that side of the desk as if we're sort of oppositional. We're not. We're on the same team. We're on the same side. We both want the same things. And so I would encourage us all. I mean, my hope for the year is that we all take some time to think about how we could help each other do our jobs a little bit better.
Fantastic, beautiful, both eloquent and incredibly relevant at this time of year. So thank you. David Turner, all the way from the Dwight School in Dubai, and Jeff Neal at Graded, the American School of Brazil. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to everybody that's been watching. Thank you for all of your questions. I think this has been an absolutely superb session. Remember this, that if you're contacting Jeff, he will respond to every personal email. You heard it here first. And if you're contacting David, then whatever you do, don't write "Dear Counselor." He has a filter for that. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, we wish you all the best for the coming season. Thank you so much for your time. A big round of applause for Jeff and Neil. Thank you, Jeff and David. And we look forward to seeing you both soon. So all the best from BMI, all the best from David and Jeff, myself, and we'll see you when you're visiting our schools, everybody. Thank you and goodbye.